Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome once again to the Highland Reserve. Today we are doing something a bit different. So far we've been acquiring animals that are readily available to build trust and reputation with the wildlife community. And today is the first sign that we're getting attention. We were contacted in the week by a prominent animal rescue group who wanted to know if we would be able to take in some donkeys that have been rescued from work sites around the world. The answer, of course, was absolutely. Setting aside the benefits to us as a wildlife organisation, these donkeys are some of the most overworked and mistreated animals in the world. They are forced to carry heavy cargo long distance, or even up mountains, and if they get injured, they're often made to continue regardless, or abandoned without care. The least we can do is provide them with a large space for them to live out the rest of their days freely and with adequate care. Now, there are also benefits for us as a zoo. I'm not sure that I like the word zoo. It has sort of a commercial connotation. I appreciate that we are trying to make money here, but that's more of a byproduct of success for me. The main goal here is conservation. Anyway, this charity reaching out to us shows that we are starting to gain attention and recognition for our animal care. This could open the door for more opportunities to support conservation and rescue initiatives around the world. This is what we are working towards. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. This is a great opportunity. But in order for it to lead to the benefits that we want, we have to make sure the animals receive the care they so desperately need. So, let's get into what's going on here. As you'll no doubt have noticed, I learned from the debacle that was the previous two videos, and I started with a roof. There is no way that this is not going to work as hard shelter. I will not allow it. The look I'm going for with this is classic American barn. You know, the big, red, country barns. You'll see I kind of had this in mind when I was putting together the chicken coops as well. A lot of the same building methods. Wanted to start with a nice white frame. I spent a long time doing this because I think if you get the skeleton of the building right, everything else should fall into place quite nicely. And it did, for the most part. I originally planned to have double doors front and back, so it was kind of a walk-through with bays on the sides to keep the donkeys in. But I don't know, it felt a little bit unnecessary, and I'm still working with limited resources here, so I didn't want to put on some DIY doors with door handles and bad hinges and then have to duplicate that at the back and not have any angle where it looks nice. So figure front entrance, still with the bays either side, nice space up the middle for opening gates, moving donkeys. I think you'll see it does come together quite nicely. At least I hope you think it comes together quite nicely. This did take a long time, and I'm not sure that when you look at the whole barn as one, it doesn't look like it should have taken a long time, if you know what I mean. I think having the individual slats layered for every wall just meant I had to put that extra bit of time and care into it. Not a technical build, but it's an in-depth one. This barn also, probably because it takes so many individual pieces to put together, has created a small lag spike in a certain area of my zoo, which is not ideal, but it's fine. I mean, since then I've managed to do a bit of landscaping around in the area, and it does pause a little bit when you put something down, but it's nothing that's going to really affect gameplay. And eventually we're going to move on from this area and spread out a bit, so I'm not too worried about that. So, obviously in the real world we haven't been contacted by a donkey charity to take in digital donkeys. This is an in-game scenario that I've made up. However, this is actually a real issue. There are animals around the world that are used in manual labour, carrying of, the most famous pictures of the donkeys that are carrying stacks of bricks. Huge stacks, far more than they should be able to carry. Some with broken limbs, terrible conditions. You know, this is not a new thing either. I remember when I was a little toddler, vaguely, many moons ago, we had a little jar in our house where we would put our spare change, and at the end, when that jar was full, we sent it off to the donkey sanctuary for this very cause. And now, an undisclosed amount of time later, you'll have to take my word for it that it was long enough, we're still here. We still have this issue. And I understand that certain places around the world, they rely on these animals to help with work. But there's no reason that they shouldn't have standards in place for how they treat them, the amount that they're allowed to carry, the conditions that they're kept under. And there are charities out there that are rescuing these animals and giving them care and trying to find them homes. But there are a lot of animals out there. Not like you can just rock up one day and confiscate all the animals and that's problem solved. Something that needs to be taught. You know, maybe we can raise awareness a little bit with videos like this. I know I've certainly been a victim of targeted ads recently for donkeys. Possibly because I was looking for inspiration on what to do with this build. I didn't really use the inspiration because they weren't very good ideas. But once you type in donkey houses on Google, you have to sift through some weird results, but eventually Google will decide this guy wants to know more about donkeys. You'll just put it in every single ad break. As much as I remembered to add the roof this time, I really didn't want to use this material for our barn. And I'm still working on research for other materials. I found that you only need to research the first part of each group to get the materials themselves, and the rest are all blueprints, which I don't really use. I think I use one in the next video, but just as an aesthetic thing. It's not a practical, it's not like a building, or I want to try and build all of those myself. Otherwise, what's the point? You're just watching people use blueprints. So I'm working through each of those first research branches, and hopefully eventually I will get some nice building materials that I can use in place of this kind of cheap, easy material. Still bearing in mind sticking to that first starter zoo, trying to keep costs down, but you know, being able to put a little bit of personality into things is quite nice. There are going to be some builds that are a bit basic, you know. Think of common farm animals like the chickens and the pigs. The pigs have quite a nice distinct dome, or they use these like little plastic igloos, which I also can't make. And the chickens have the coops, so they're not so bad. But you come to things like sheep, cows, you either go for the barn, which is what we're building here today, for the donkeys. I don't see that there's much need for another one, unless I want to go for a different take on a barn. But then we're just dotting barns around all over the place. The next option is one of these big concrete sheds. And depending on the amount of animals that I want to adopt, that might be the way to go for maybe one of those. We'll have to see. Hopefully we'll get more opportunities, as I say. Off the back of this donkey rehab. Yeah, let's go with donkey rehab. Off the back of this, we'll gain a little bit of respect, a bit of a reputation for being, one, willing to take on these sorts of cases, and two, proficient. You know, the enclosure that we're building today is larger than the other two that we've built here so far. This barn is quite big. It's going to be able to hold quite a few animals. So being able to show that willingness and ability is definitely going to help with people's confidence in sending animals to us. You know, there's certainly a few species around here, rescues and farm animals, that are on the cards. I don't think there's going to be many imports. But saying that, you know, the alpine goats, they are quite common. I think they're just goats. So there's definitely the option for having them. Llamas and alpacas as well. I think I'll go for one or the other. I don't see the point of having both. But they're definitely raised in the UK, so there's the opportunity to have them. And we'll see how far we get before opportunities for different locations come up. Because eventually somewhere's going to become available. They're going to be looking for someone to operate and build these places. I've always wondered how they bring these animals over from abroad. I'm assuming they do it on a ship. But I've always had this vision of a donkey being airlifted by a helicopter. Which I know is just stupid. It's not practical. But imagine being the first donkey to fly. Imagine the thoughts going through that animal's head. All this time, its entire life spent with twice, 3 times, 4 times its body weight piled onto its back, forcing it into the ground. Suddenly it's lifted off its feet and flying through the air. I have no idea if that is in any way part of reality, but it's fun to think about. This is likely to be the only enclosure that has guest access. I figure these are animals that are raised around people, by people. They're used to that interaction with humans. And I don't know necessarily whether it is good or bad for them to then just cut that off straight away. I imagine as long as they're having positive interactions with people, it's probably quite good for them. I don't know. I haven't really spoken much about the design of this habitat. I think it's fairly obvious what I was going for. Staying in line with the big American barn, I've gone for sort of an American ranch. A donkey ranch. I didn't want to overdo it because it still needs to fit in with the UK theme. I thought this would be a nice slice of America just sitting smack bang in the middle of my park. Again, I didn't want to overdo it with the rocks, but these donkeys are probably taken from countries where it's very dry. There's not a lot of fresh foliage or grass to speak of. So I've given them a nice lush area to run around in, with some familiar features, the rock-clad ground I think they'll be accustomed to. But generally it's about space and freedom. And I think with a rescue animal that's really the most important thing you can give them. Anyway, it's about that time when I can stop talking. I have a newfound respect for voiceover artists and anyone who makes YouTube videos. This is definitely the hardest part, finding something to talk about for 20 minutes. I'm going to have to keep this series short so I can try and have things to say and not repeat myself too much. Oh well, I'll figure it out. I hope you've enjoyed the donkey rehab, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one.